I like the diversity in opinion that I see from the unwashed masses, and it's a good reality check on the expert class that keeps on dittoing each other in Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Everybody will have their own TV stations that'll be tailored to them with their own advertising content that's relative to them.
Television will remain strong, and I think this golden age of storytelling on television will continue.
Alice Cooper in the studio, what's he like?
He and I, we're brothers from other mothers, you know, and I've never been more comfortable with anyone in my life.
At least Canadian airports are generally clean and modern and efficient buildings operated by courteous people, and not the ramshackle, rundown terminals filled with obese passengers and surly personnel who specialize in patting down political opponents or aged women that are usually encountered in the U.S.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, The Zoomer with Conrad Black and Denise Donlon.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to The Zoomer, and I'd like to welcome all of our viewers, those watching on televisions, laptops, smartphones, tablets. Actually, we don't care if you're watching on your shoe phone. It's actually good to have you here for our discussion on the media.
It's been transformed by changing consumer tastes and by, of course, evolving technology and the endless proliferation of the marketplace. I mean, some of us at the panel are almost as old as I am and would remember when we only had 5 television channels.
True. I can remember. I remember black and white. And all of these new medias are all competing for our attention, which is getting shorter and shorter all the time.
And you didn't have to be a B-52 pilot to record a TV program.
But attention spans are getting shorter, right?
Yes, I have some figures that sound bites have gone from 43 seconds in the 1968 American election to under 10 seconds in the last election. Wow. It's a steady drive to simplify things. Right.
I could explain $1 trillion macroeconomic policy in 7 seconds. Right. Not sure it's helpful. Anyway, today the media is the message. Let's tee up the topic.
Yummy. When only 4 companies own 90% of all Canadian TV stations, media consolidation in Canada means gobble or get gobbled. Like your media local? Well, increasingly in newspapers, one size fits all. Like your media free? Perhaps you like your media aggregated. Like your newspaper? On paper? On tablet? For free? Or soiled? How do you like your cable? Bundled, unbundled, or just plain cut? Like your programming Canadian? Last year, privately owned Canadian TV network spent $726 million buying U.S. entertainment programs, but only $58 million on domestic entertainment productions. Like your journalism with a little depth? With so many media options, the business model for traditional media is changing faster than you can change the channel.
So when it comes to media, there's no question we're living in interesting times. And we've got some very wise people around the table who think about this every day, whether they want to or not. So, Philip, I'm going to start with you, because when you look at the decline in newspaper subscriptions, I understand that revenues have plummeted by $23 billion in the last 6 years. Kind of reminds me of the music industry a few years back. And it would be really easy to write off newspapers, but I understand that you've made a huge investment, $2 billion in new printing presses, so you're seeing a rosy future out there.
My perspective is that papers with the kind of strength the Globe and Mail has, will be around for a long time to come. But there's no question lots of other newspapers will disappear because their economic model will not sustain. So we need to be out there more aggressively, convincing advertisers, convincing readers that what we're doing is still relevant and still what they need.
And still has great value.
And still has a value that people are prepared to pay for. The idea of giving content away for free is, as far as I'm concerned, abhorrent. It's just silly. And we did it for too long. And I think what you've seen over the last few years is some of the major players, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, charging for content and doing it successfully.
One of the problems, though, with the paywall model that everyone's going to is if there is a high-quality, well-resourced competitor on the internet that's giving it away for free, you're doomed. And by that I mean the CBC. And if they're dumping that subsidized news on the internet, in a high-quality way, you may find it difficult to charge for essentially the same breaking news that they do.
I agree with you, Philip, that the industry was too defeatist. Even when I first got into it, which was a long time ago, it was afraid of television. And especially in North American newspapers, unlike Britain, where you're from and where I did a lot of business in that business, you had the worst aspects of monopolies in many cities, not in Toronto, but in many cities. So you got sort of complacent, arrogant newspapers that were in fact defeatist opposite the other media. I think it's a splendid thing that you made the investment you did, and I think you're absolutely right that as readership has declined, it's come down to the point where anyone in this country who buys a newspaper is an ABC1 reader, a person of relatively high education and income. And there is a great number of people who like to see it read. Even Bill Gates says if it's more than 2 pages, I hit the print button. I mean, read physically, read in hand. And so I think you're right to lead a sort of goal line stand here, except you're not quite at the goal line. You're out a bit from that. I'm not the best qualified person to use a sports metaphor, but I think the obsequies of newspapers have been pronounced prematurely.
McLean, what do you think about what's going on out there?
Well, I think the challenge for the newspaper industry, quite frankly, is that as everything goes digital, they're no longer just competing against each other on tablets. They're also competing against Netflix, competing against ebooks, against games. It's all the same screen. So getting that attention and monetizing that is not as easy as it used to be. The other big challenge is what we call capital efficiency and what us nerds call disruption, which is basically the fact that with technology you can do things much easier, much faster, and a lot less expensive. Mm-hmm. And so the perfect example is Craigslist. They basically wiped out $5 billion from the US classified ad industry, and in exchange, Craigslist makes about $155 million a year with 20 people. That to me speaks volumes in terms of what the challenges are with the newspaper industry.
Well, I mean, the digital revolution is affecting every single platform differently. Television's different than newspapers. Newspapers are different than magazines. Unlike newspapers, which have been challenged from an audience point of view, magazines used to be read out of 8 of 10 households. They're still read by 8 out of 10 households. But that having been said, the transformation of the way to pay for it is affecting everybody. So the decline in advertising revenues affects magazines, not to the degree it's affected newspapers, but the trend is the same. The challenges are not dissimilar. It's important to not to undermine the quality. If you undermine quality, you're lost.
Television is not turbulent at the moment. People are talking about cutting their cable, and maybe Netflix is the future of TV at this point.
Well, I think television has always been attacked or sneered at by competing media. If you just look at the United States and the over-the-air networks, most Americans watch about 152 hours a month of traditional television. What is not yet measured accurately, which is people watching television programs on video on demand, online, on their iPad, on multiple platforms. The death of television is not imminent. Television is actually quite strong.
I love this guy. Not only do I read his column, I
love you too, man.
Thank you. Obviously, I couldn't agree more. I think that even leaving aside the unmeasured, the viewership is very strong. But just to challenge something, Conrad, you said that nobody's ever given away their content. In the over-the-air business, we've been giving away our content for 60 years and living off the advertising and with our clients. And as long as we can maintain that same relationship with our viewers, provide a quality product that people are prepared to watch, they're paying for it with their eyeballs and their time. And that, I think, makes a strong business model.
The difference is, of course, you have no cost of delivery. You don't have to print your product, and you don't have to deliver it through the streets to the customer.
But they have to invest in cameras and big transmission infrastructures and fund
it's not
the
the
same
same.
thing?
He spent $2 billion on presses, or at least your printer did.
But it is true that we're in a golden age of television. I mean, there's a remarkable amount of terrific television being produced, and major film stars are now moving to the small and smaller screens.
The golden age of television you're talking about, the strength of excellent storytelling that mainly comes out of premium cable channels in the US, that is based on the subscription model.
Exactly.
That is the business model for that excellence in television. A channel like HBO figured out something. They figured out that if they delivered unique, adult, strong content to those subscribers, they would keep paying. It's about paying for quality.
What HBO came on to was they said, we have this really high quality a broadcast, it's commercialized, so we can put out something that, frankly, YouTube can't broadcast. They just don't have the quality. And yet, if you look at it, reality TV, which is all this high quality production value stuff that is no more, by definition, when I look at that production value, that is not reality TV. It should be over on YouTube. And when you get things aligned and to the point of print and things, I think brands play a critical role here. I don't think, we have seen no media is going away. It just gets bigger and better. There's devices to deliver things differently. But there's a difference between the origin of the output of whatever the medium is versus what consumers are actually taking in.
There's a lot of blurring that's happening right now. You can have YouTube on your big screen at home and the quality is HD 1080p and it looks as good as any traditional television. If you look at companies like Netflix, for instance, now they're doing original programming with House of Cards. Like the notion that traditional television has this advantage of storytelling and premium content, I think is actually blurring. And I find it interesting because if you look at the numbers, Canadians who are between 18 and 24, 25% of them have cut their cable.
Netflix, when they invested in those original programs, is doing exactly the same thing that HBO did. Netflix, as revolutionary as it may seem, is actually using a very traditional television model.
Right. Well, it's really important to not only attract the eyeballs, but to retain them over time. And we're going to take a short break right now and screen some of Doug Turney. He's president of McLaren McCann's advertising work. Doug, this is your favorite part of the show, right? Come on. Come on, don't hide it. Tell us the truth.
Good.
You're excited. Okay.
I'm excited.
We'll be back in a second. Welcome back. Today we're talking about media, focusing on the tussle between digital and traditional. And there's no shortage of quantity out there. We know that for sure. But I wonder if there's something happening to the quality. How do you keep the quality of your journalism where you need it to be?
Well, the way we manage our costs is to make sure that we have the money to keep investing. And this, we did a big series on the Arctic. The travel bill alone to get a group of journalists to travel around the Arctic is $100,000.
So I do respect the investment to go to the Arctic, $100,000 in travel. No blogger is going to do that. And that's quality that everyone can acknowledge. But you also have opinion writers. Anyone can have an opinion. When there were 5 TV channels or 3 TV channels, there wasn't a great range of opinion, and especially if they were all headquartered in Toronto or maybe Montreal. But with the breakup of the monopolies in the old media technology, other voices, for example, I would say conservative voices, are getting a little bit more of a toehold in the national conversation. Now, I think that there's still a lot of uniformity in the parliamentary press gallery. I call it the consensus media or even the media party on key issues. I'll just give you the example of the theory of man-made global warming. I mean, I was speaking at a
theory? Well, is it a theory?
Exactly.
It's not a theory.
Well, I put it to you that if you step out of your newspaper onto the street and ask severely normal people on any of these key issues, on the war in Iraq, on gun control, you would find a diversity of opinion that is lacking. And I like the breakup of the legacy media because it allows other voices in, first through talk radio, now through the internet and Twitter. Any old yokel like me can heckle a fancy person on Twitter now. I would never have had that access before. I like the disruption from an ideological diversity point of view.
Philip, do you think that's true?
I think people want a range of opinions for sure, and I think when Conrad launched the National Post, one of the reasons he did that was to extend the range of conversation, which he felt was too narrow. But you're better to talk about that than me.
That is certainly the case. The fact is the overwhelming influence on public opinion formation in the English-speaking part of Canada was conducted by the Globe and Mail, the CBC, the Toronto Star, and up to a point Maclean's Magazine. And they all essentially, with respect, Philip, said the same thing, that we always had to govern to the left of the United States, and we had to go farther than many Canadians wished to do, appeasing Quebec nationalism. And we offered a different view.
Is it harder to understand a political point of view when it's online versus when it's the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, the National Post, or even Sun Media?
Well, I put it to you that a so-called expert writing for a newspaper, may think he's smarter than your average bear, but if you do a crowdsource on that issue through a democratic media like Twitter, you're going to find a technical expert that's better every day of the week than your legacy media party so-called experts. And I like the diversity in opinion that I see from the unwashed masses, and it's a good reality check on the expert class that keeps on dittoing each other in Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto.
As one of the so-called experts, as you put it, writing for a newspaper that you're dissing, I have to challenge you on some of the things here. You mentioned conservative voices getting a toehold in the Canadian media. The most Canadian media is conservative already. What you're talking about is fringe. The fringe voice is getting a toehold. And with all due respect...
Well, it depends what you label fringe. I mean, you may label something, like pro-life is considered fringe position in the media party. But depending on how you ask the question, I'd say about 40% of Canadians call themselves a form of pro-life. I'm sure that's called fringe in the newsroom of the Globe and Mail.
First of all, I don't think there is a media party, and if there is, I haven't been invited. And it would be a pretty dull party anyway, judging by, with all due respect to Philip, what Globe and Mail parties tend to be like. I think you are talking about fringe views. And
like skepticism of global warming?
Yes.
Just because you name it as fringe doesn't mean it is.
Well, I will say this.
You just proved my point, haven't you?
No, I will congratulate you for making your fringe views very entertaining on Sun News. And when you take a chainsaw to a potted plant on television to make a point about Earth Day, I congratulate you for making excellent television. But it is still, that is a fringe, that is a use of an entertainment device to support what is essentially a fringe view.
But that actually is proof of my media party point, that simply saying anyone who's not at our existing table is extremist, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I put it to you that the number one source on cable news in Canada is CNN, and the number one website is not Canadian, but maybe, Drudge is an enormous source of information for Canadians. It's because people aren't getting what they want from a bunch of ditto heads telling them they're fringe. Stephen Harper's won, 3 elections in a row? Because people don't buy what you're selling, John.
They do buy what I'm selling, actually, and with all due respect...
Politically. You're fine on soccer, and you're fine on TV, but ideologically political, people don't buy it.
With all due respect, there are times when there are more people reading my column in the Globe and Mail than are watching Sun News.
For comedy value, you're quite entertaining too.
All right then. Okay, let's see if we can tweak the subject just a little bit. What's happening to investigative journal, entrepreneurial journalism? Something like Enquête, for example, took 2 years before they worked and uncovered what was going on in the Montreal construction industry. As we go forward, as these distributions make every voice possible, for good or ill, what's going to happen to that long-form journalism, that journalism that's actually really deep and takes a long time to get into the nut of the matter and is in the public interest?
Right. We acquired CHCH about 5 years ago now, and we were no more than about 2 months into it, and we had a great team of people that had been there for a number of years and really good quality journalists. And Gordon Lightfoot died, and I was devastated.
Didn't. I'm seeing him on Monday, actually.
And there's the point.
Never mind. Pretty healthy on the weekend.
So there's an example of not only can the Twittersphere get it wrong, but so can media, the traditional media, trying to react at the speed without taking the time. Maybe not 2 years for investigative journalism, but to do it right. And there's a different space for both.
We've got to be careful of this stuff. Denise, throwing money at stories in respected outlets doesn't necessarily produce scoops that are authentic, and it is not necessarily the case.
But if the Toronto Star had paid the money
for Gawker,
would they have had the story that nailed the truth on that one? But they declined to pay because they didn't think it was the right thing to do.
Well, they later paid $5,000 for the mayor shouting at someone in a living room, so they're not above. Those quality journalists are not above paying cash for vids.
Well, I don't think anyone's accusing the Toronto Star of being a quality newspaper.
Let me put forth just an idea for a moment in terms of how the crowdsourcing blogosphere level of journalists. Maybe they're not all journalists; they're just people with something to say out there, and the traditional mainstream skilled journalists can work together. And I remember it happened at the Washington Post. So suddenly there was a moment when U.S. congressmen's expense reports were suddenly a matter of public availability. You could just get them. And what happened was the public unearthed the information, and then the journalists took it and built it into a story with values that people expected. Is that a good way for them both to get along?
There is a shift that's happening among bloggers right now. If you look at websites like Gawker.com or BuzzFeed.com, where they're actually trying to do more investigative pieces, longer pieces, better quality. And the Borg, also known as Google, is actually rewarding people for that. If you want to get good organic traffic from Google, they look for quality journalism.
And would advertisers pay for that? How does that work?
I think advertisers pay big time for that. Journalists used to be trained to be objective. And objectivity was a core value that journalism versus advertising, the twain shall never meet, and it was legitimate.
And reporting and opinion, and demarcate between
Exactly, objectivity. And when you listened to a story, people were trained, they were educated to deliver things in a very nonpartisan way that made sense for everybody. And I think objectivity now with digital has been replaced with transparency, because I don't know of very many media outlets of any type that are not aligned to one side or another where they are no longer objective. They definitely have agendas. And under the spirit of transparency, they're saying we can do that because everybody have the right to see all this information. And to the point of what's out there in the digital space, nobody has the ability to get all the information to develop an informed opinion anymore. So, relative to going forward, the brand of the Globe and Mail, who is it? And one of the interesting one for me on one of the largest reads is BBC. People watching British news because they think it's more legitimate than CNN and certainly Fox out of the US or what's here. The Globe, is in that camp of it is an objective voice. But
I wouldn't bet the ranch on the objectivity of the Beeb if I were you either. I mean, it is a good news
They have
service,
English
but
accents.
It's
They've
very
got to believe
contentious.
We've got lots more to go, so stay with us. We're a media panel, of course, so we think we know everything. And we're going to talk about the future when we get back. Stay with us. Okay, we're going to go quickly around the table for some short snappers about the future of media. In 30 seconds, Doug?
Today, 2013, 2/3 of 2014. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we'd taped this earlier.
Time shifted.
2014. In 2013, 2/3 of Apple's revenues, Apple Corporation's revenues, came from products that were released after 2007. So to say that we can predict what will happen 10 or 20 years is ludicrous, it seems to me, other than to say curious people will always be engaged with great content.
The future is going to look an awful lot like the past has, which is things repeat. People still need local news. They're going to go somewhere for that. They still need to know what's happening in the world. They still need to be entertained. And so they're going to find places to do that. And while the number of screens can proliferate and the number of places you can watch it or read the content change, we're still going to be animals that are going to consume media and news and want to be entertained with sports and other media.
The vulnerability of television is overstated. I think there will be some specialty small channels that will probably go to the wall, but television will remain strong. And I think this golden age of storytelling on television will continue. In terms of the bigger, vast, chaotic canvas of media, I would hope the future belongs to me and to people like me. That is, the expert advisor on what to watch and why. And you're only going to get that in the Globe and Mail.
There you go. And expert marketer, I would say. Yeah.
Well done.
Ezra.
I think in the past we watch TV, but in the present and future, TV watches us. What I mean by that is every email we send, every Facebook page, every YouTube video we watch, everything we say on the phone. I saw the other day the NSA captures 200 million text messages per day. I don't think it's being paranoid to talk that way anymore, and I think there will be some people who want to log off and get off the grid and just have some private time. Of course, the GPS in their cell phone won't give them that either.
I agree that there's going to be, I think, a backlash on the privacy side. But, trying to forecast the future, 10 years ago, we didn't have a single videographer at the Globe. Now we've got more video people than straight photographers. The readership on tablets is exploding. But whether that's still the device of choice in 5 years' time, I couldn't begin to forecast that.
When you look at the ability, everybody will have their own TV stations that'll be tailored to them with their own advertising content that's relative to them. There's going to be content where people themselves, it'll be produced digitally where your digital profile will be in the show, or you're going to be in it yourself. I mean, it's pie in the sky at this time, Doug, but it's going to be the Wild West for sure.
Well, the future to me is actually Google. Google is the company to watch, and they have actually a lot more influence than many of us realize, including journalism. A lot of writing now is influenced by optimizing the copy so that it gets picked up by Google. So I think that they're going to be much bigger than people realize.
Well, they have my thumbprint. It's a good thing I'm not a spy. Conrad, future?
It's just going to get more and more accessible and available and omnipresent. I do, however, sound a further note of optimism, which is I think public tastes will improve. I mean, we all remember when four-letter words couldn't be put in films. And I happened to go to The Wolf of Wall Street the other day.
Ooh.
And it has its moments, but I mean, I don't care particularly, but there's nothing left to show people in terms of sexual activity, and there's nothing left for people to listen to in terms of torrents of four-letter words. And so we've gone through the kind of adolescent act of putting it out there, and I think in general public taste will say, well, that's fine, we know all that, and we don't want it in our face all the time. But maybe I'm being an optimist. It's not out of prudery, it's just out of taste.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm actually looking forward, just thinking about it now, about the tsunami of information that's coming at you all the time, as I thought by now there'd be a better refinement in the media butler, someone who would, look at the aggregation of the media personally for you, give you what you want, when you want it.
It's more precious than ever, and that's the strength of the newspaper.
I think there's big money in that kind of personalized editorial function, which is, of course, attached to my subcutaneous device with an antenna on my head that I will accessorize. So, thank you, panel, for your wisdom around the table. We're going to be back in a second, but first, we have a big media announcement.
What?
I actually slept with the Masters. I'd wake up every 15 minutes with one eye open just to make sure they were still there and just reach out and touch them because I knew that I was sitting on something so valuable.
So, Conrad, when you were a teenager, did music play a big part in your life? Were you a Pink Floyd fan, by chance?
I went straight from Elvis to Mozart.
Right. So you.
And when I was a teenager, Pink Floyd was in his crib,
So you skipped most of what master producer Bob Ezrin did. Who around the table? Pink Floyd?
Oh,
No. Yeah.
Dark Side of the Moon.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The Wall. Alice Cooper. School's Out.
Forever.
That was totally the voice of rebellion. Well, I caught up with master producer and hitmaker Bob Ezrin. He told some amazing stories about music, legacy, and sleeping with the masters, which isn't actually as tawdry as it sounds. Let's have a look.
The wind could blow my troubles away. I would stand in a hurricane.
Half of the insanity that is Alice Cooper lives somewhere inside the jigsaw puzzle mind that is Bob Ezrin. Bob, of course, went on to produce some of the greatest rock albums ever made: Kiss, Aerosmith, Peter Gabriel, Pink Floyd, anyone else who dared to work with him.
Welcome all the way from Nashville.
It's my great pleasure. I'll tell you, the minute I get off the plane and I get back here, I can't even explain it, but it's something cellular. I do just feel like Home.
Well, you were born in Toronto.
Yes, I was,
Right.
and raised.
And when did you leave? About what age?
Well, I left a couple of times. The
Right.
first time I left was in 1975, where I moved to New York for a little while, and then 1980, just after finishing The Wall, I came back because I figured, you know, this is a pretty big record and people are going to come looking for me.
Kind of big
Not so
record,
much.
yeah.
It was like after 3 years, it was Bob who?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
but did
so-
you know at the time you were making musical history? I mean, that Pink Floyd The Wall has been on everyone's best albums of all time list for all time.
I knew that we were sitting on something really big. I did. And there was a point at which actually, I hate to admit it, but I actually slept with the masters. I'd wake up every 15 minutes with one eye open just to make sure they were still there and just reach out and touch them because I knew that I was sitting on something so valuable.
That must have been a very lumpy bed because master tapes in those days.
Well, they
were
weren't
this
in the
big
bed. They were on a
honking-
chair beside the bed, and
Okay.
I was sleeping on the bed looking at them, yes.
Alice Cooper in the studio, what's he like?
He's like my brother, so he's, you know, Alice Cooper in the studio or Alice Cooper in
the golf course or
in the kitchen or Alice Cooper in the living room sitting in my spot watching television. You know, he and I, we're brothers from other mothers, you know, and I've never been more comfortable with anyone in my life, you know, working with anyone, and it's just like, it's such a kind of symbiotic and naturally interdependent, not codependent, interdependent relationship.
Yeah.
So he's always been great in the studio and easy to work with.
What's your secret to career longevity, do you think?
I just think I'm eternally restless, and but at the same time enthusiastic. You know, like my wife just says. My wife says I'm 64 going on 15. You know, and when people joke about like, well, you don't know what it's like to live with teenagers, she said, oh yeah. Yeah. So I think that's it. You know, I'm just I'm restless and enthusiastic, and I absolutely love what I do. All of it.
Tell me about your interest in music education. We have been on a same committee together, Music Counts, which takes and raises money to put music instruments in schools that can't afford to have instruments.
Look,
or music.
it's you know, music education is just part of what I'm interested in. What I'm really interested in is the development of children and fulfilling our responsibility as a society to growing kids with the skills and the character that they need to be able to succeed in the world that we're leaving them. It's in our culture that we find our inner purpose. We find our meaning as a person, as people. And then we get to express that meaning through a lot of different means. We can become doctors, lawyers, successful business people, we can even be performers. It's not because we need to turn out a whole new generation of concert pianists that we should be teaching music education. But it is because the kids who study music in school, in a music class, music education in school, they learn to work together as a group, they learn to take direction, they learn to own their own part while being the part of something greater. They learn how to take abstract concepts on a piece of paper, little dots and lines, that's all they are, and turn them into a beautiful physical reality. They learn that application produces results, because the more they practice, the better they get. And they learn how to dream. And so I want those kids, I want the kids who know those things to grow up and take care of me when I'm too old to do it for myself.
Exactly.
It's purely self-defense, actually.
Absolutely,
you know?
right. No
It's like-
problem. There's nothing wrong with that.
No,
Bob. Yeah,
no. But seriously, you know, if we take that away, you know, this may be the first culture in history that has stripped away culture. From the education of its children.
It's mind-boggling, really.
Yeah.
And you know, that was a huge list, but there's so much more to that list, right? It helps them with their math acuity. It helps in social interpersonal relationships, and all of that stuff makes them
that's
better
what I mean
humans.
about the part about working within a group and all that stuff. Yes, it does. I would pay to be in this business, honest to God. But to be able to do it and have people actually pay me for it, and then to be able to work with these fantastic people and to do projects that give me so much fulfillment and at the same time seem to touch others, you know? It's a blessing and a privilege. I love it. I'm thankful for it every single day.
I don't think there's better words to end with than that. And congratulations once again.
Thank you.
Big congratulations.
Thank you.
And for all you do. And
Thank
for
you.
the legacy that you're leaving and the people you're helping. Not to mention that Pink Floyd record and, you know, School's Out. Alice Cooper looks so tame now. Remember at the time? People's hair were on fire. They were running in the streets. It was the end of civilization as we knew it. Who plays an instrument around the table?
Slightly the piano.
The piano? Ezra? Piano?
Piano and bass guitar.
Piano, bass guitar? John?
No, not note in me head. I can bang two spoons together occasionally.
Spoons are very good. Rhythmic qualities there.
I used to be a rock critic, but I can't play a
You
single
were a
instrument.
rock critic.
Yeah.
That's why you have a British accent.
In the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Golden days.
Was that when you worked for the Telegraph?
No, before then.
Doug? No? McLean?
Yeah, I play a few instruments. Also, I play the computer.
You play the computer.
Also
Very good.
software-based instruments.
It is interesting, though, you know, the whole idea of music education, and maybe because it's provincially funded versus federally funded, but he makes a good case for music education in the schools.
Music skills lead to math skills. It's very good to teach young children, very young children, because it really develops their mind.
Well, totally, from music critic to publisher, obviously. It developed a mind over there. And we're going to be back in 2 seconds with a Talk Black on security in the air. So fasten your seatbelt and put your table in an upright position, perhaps. Okay. So, Conrad, the Olympics are coming up, and we're looking forward to some amazing performances by the Canadians. But I've got a new one for you, a non-agenarian undecathlete.
That would be someone in their 90s who has done more than 10 events?
Oh, I can never get you on these things. Exactly. She's 95, she's from Vancouver, and she's dominating track and field.
In what event?
Well, she's who you're going to see. She's hogging the podium. Let's meet her. Okay. Olga.
She's being referred to as one of the world's greatest athletes. Canadian track and field star Olga Kotelko holds 26 world records. And she has no plans of slowing down as she approaches her 95th birthday with the launch of a new book entitled What Makes Olga Run.
I like running because I do 3 sprints, 100 meter, 200 meter, and 400 meter. I've even done 800 meters as well. Plus, I do jumps. My daughter says she runs distances, she jumps heights, and she throws things.
Olga Kotelko from British Columbia, Canada.
Well, it turns out Olga is my neighbor, sort of, on the North Shore of Vancouver, and I didn't know it. I read about her one day in the local paper way back 5 years ago, and I was intrigued by her, and I thought, wow, there could be a story in this woman.
I started being an athlete when I turned 77.
You're kidding?
And I chose to be a young at heart athlete rather than an old woman. Competed in Brazil in October, and there was nobody there.
No kidding.
Usually there's a lady from Mexico, and then of course I thought maybe somebody from South America, but I was the only one. That's right. So I am trying to beat my own records. I eat wholesome food. I exercise. I go to aquafit class. Oh, and I bowl 10-pin.
You bowl too?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
10-pin, and my average is at this time 127.
Well, is there anything that you're not good at?
I can't think of anything.
What Makes Olga Run is available at bookstores and online across the country. Here at Monarch Park Stadium in Toronto, I'm Darren Maharaj for The Zoomer.
She started at 76. See, there's hope. From 77, there's your goal. It's like a New Year's resolution. When I get to be 77, I'm going to get in shape.
Yeah, we can't say, we can't rush the fences and start too early here.
Well, totally. Well, all the way to 95. That's an amazing story. I think we should copyright her knees, though, quickly.
The fact is that most airport security is pettifogging and window dressing to discourage the complete amateurs and embolden the traveling public. The fiasco of Vincent Kelly and his pipe bomb of the flight from Edmonton to Mexico highlights the shortcomings of a great deal of airport security. Mr. Kelly was discovered to have a pipe bomb in his luggage bound for Mexico, but said he had forgotten about the bomb whose ingredients he had pinched from his stepfather to blow up an unused shed. The unskilled labor in the security unit at the airport allowed him to proceed with the bomb in his luggage to Mexico, but Kelly wisely declined. It is, in its way, a rather heartwarming Canadian tale. Kelly admitted the story and swore no criminal intent, and it seems plausible that no harm was intended. In the circumstances, though it seems very odd and even negligent, security did find the bomb, were apparently correctly satisfied that the passenger was not a menace, and he was allowed to continue his trip. The fact is that most airport security is pettifogging and window dressing to discourage the complete amateurs and embolden the traveling public. It is like the tanks that appear at London's Heathrow Airport after the periodic incidents that occur there. They are impressive, but of no possible utility. At least Canadian airports are generally clean and modern and efficient buildings operated by courteous people, and not the ramshackle, rundown terminals filled with obese passengers and surly personnel who specialize in patting down political opponents or aged women that are usually encountered in the US. Canada needs a little more professionalism in its air terminals, but it does not need and does not want another fascistical lurch towards stricter enforcement of absurd controls. What is needed is a little more rigorous application of common sense.
So next week we're focused on legacy, and Moses has an expression which I love, which is live well, do good, die broke. Conrad, what do you think?
I still don't see the attractions of dying broke, and I don't see what it does for your legacy.
Well, you could give it away after you're gone. Oh, that's what people do.
That's not quite the same.
Okay.
If you die broke, you got nothing to give away.
You just have to time it right. Thanks for being with us. We're going to see you all next week. Let's zoom out.